Hey there, Stampers. This is Carrie here, and I want to share with you a card I created for someone special. It's an adventure card, and it is completely using some Fun Stampers Journey stamps that are brand new to our collection. I wanted to share with you how to create this card, as well as the fun technique I used to create a little background element that makes it look like a flannel shirt. So, in creating this card, I used several different stamp sets, and I want to share with you today. The first stamp set that I used is the Nature Grown set. It's a collection of 5 tree stamps that are beautifully drawn and sketched, and I just love them for backgrounds. Our new packaging comes in a sleeve, plastic sleeve, and it is a plastic slate that you can adhere your stamps, cling mount stamps to. All of our stamps are indexed on the back so that you can position them easily on your stamp block. Alright, the next stamp set that I'm using is called the Adventure Awaits set. This is a great set for those friends or family members that you have that enjoy lots of sporting activities in the outdoors. I love that it includes lots of different collections and types of activities like backpacking and boating and kayaking and hiking, as well as bird watching. So it's kind of a fun set. See the little hatchet there? It's cute. And some great sentiments as well. Just sharing a little bit more of what I love about this set. My dad has a pair of those, and we always go out and take a look at the birds with them. All right, and the final set that I'm using isn't quite a set, it's just one stamp, but it's a background stamp. And this is called Flannel Life. It's brand new to the collection, and it's great for backgrounds, and I really, really love to use it to create realistic looking backgrounds and designs like flannel shirts and stuff. So that's what I'll be using today. I love that I can use this stamp without even using a block, and that's what I'll be doing today. So the first thing I'm going to go to is just share with you some of the cardstock that I'm using. I'll be using some Denim Days as my background paper, some Oatmeal cookie paper that will be used for most of the card, as well as a little piece of a scrap piece of whipped cream cardstock for the boots. I'm also going to be using some white liner tape, just a little bit of white liner tape to hold my sewn fibers, some black journey twine, some of my most favorite embellishing material, some little teeny wooden buttons, and I used also several different inks. So I have oatmeal cookie, cocoa powder, raspberry berry, which is a great burgundy color, and black licorice. And then I used a little bit of buttercream. I'm also using 2 Prismacolor pencils, 2 of the lighter brown colors, actually 2 of the brown colors. One is a lighter color and one is a darker color. And I'm just going to use those to accentuate some of my watercoloring that I'm going to be doing with our Fun Stampers Journey ink. Also, I love my craft glue, so I'll be using that. And so let's get started on the project. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the oatmeal cookie paper down. I'm going to use a piece of craft mat that I use in my Bible journaling. It's just the perfect size to be able to just cover up your paper and not be able to make a mess. So I tend to lay it down a little bit every time I stamp. So I'm going to apply a little bit of the buttercream ink onto the flannel stamp. I want to make sure that I'm not too worried about getting some crisp, beautiful so thick ink on this stamp. I just want to apply just a little bit, just enough to cover my paper. I'm going to lay my paper on top of the stamp and rub it a little bit just to adhere some of that ink. Lifting it off, I will be able to reveal what it looks like. Great contact, great pattern. I love it. Alright, so the next step is I'm going to be adding a little bit more ink. I'm going to be using the Raspberry Berry. I'm not going to clean my block off or my stamp pad off. I'm just going to continue on, just adding just a little bit here and there of the ink, just putting a little bit over in the corner, a little bit in there. I don't want to completely cover this paper because I want it to be distressed, so I'm just going to use a little bit of all the different colors that I'm using today. Rub it again, just to pick up some of that ink. And then I'm going to flip it over, and you can see that I don't have a complete contact with all of the paper, and that's what I was looking for. I just want to do a little bit of crinkle distressing. Now I can add a little bit more ink to my paper, and this time I'm going to use my cocoa powder, and I have just a dab here and there. That'll be good enough. And I'll lay my paper back onto that stamp and rub it in a little bit more. Lift it up, and there you can see I have lots of different colors and lots of great pattern. Now I am going to flip my pad over, or my stamp over, just a little bit more and just take off some of that ink that's on my stamp just by dabbing it onto the card paper. I'm going to rub my fingers over the top of it just to soften up those lines on the paper and blend some of the colors together. I have an empty space there, so I'm going to add a little bit more of that red burgundy color just to fill up the page a little bit more. It's okay if it's not lined up perfectly. This is going to be distressed anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, rub it in a little bit more. And I'm going to get started with the next step. Alright, so the next step is I'm going to crinkle up this paper a little bit. I want to try to make this paper more fabric-like and soft, so I'm just crinkling it up to break down the fibers and to soften up the paper. So I'll keep crumpling, crinkling, and shaking the fibers back and forth with my fingers so that I can tear the fibers without tearing the paper. This will soften up the paper and make it more fabric-like. I love this technique because it really does make it feel like fabric. So as I continue on shredding the fibers within the paper, just trying my hardest to get every single piece or corner of that paper softened up. Once I finish, I'll flatten it out on the paper or on that craft mat right down there and open it up. Just a few more pieces. Alright, I think it's soft enough. Now I'm going to flatten it out a little bit, and I'm going to take some cocoa powder ink and my fingertips, the perfect artist tool, and I'm just going to rub it lightly over the top of those wrinkles, and that will just accentuate those wrinkle lines to make it more worn looking. Alright, I'm going to crumble it one more time and rub it between my fingers to soften up the ink so that it's not so crisp and bright. I just don't want it to make it look aged a little bit. So just rub it between my fingers a little bit just to rub that ink in. And now I'm finished with that section. So now I'm going to fold up the bottom edge. Actually, I'm going to fold up both sides. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a fold line that will mimic the stitching on a pair of jeans or a pair of fabric sleeves. So I'll just fold it up a little bit, and then I will take it to my sewing machine and stitch it up using some black thread on my sewing machine. This will be able to create two pieces, so I can create two cards with this piece of paper. I'm going to stitch right along that top edge there, cut right down the middle, and then I'll have two pieces that I will be able to use on a card. The first one was already used on my demonstration card. So this is the model. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so that you can see what it looks like after it's been stitched. Okay, so after it unblurs itself, you can see the stitching. Of course, my bottom row was very stuck in the machine and kind of created a few hiccups there, but it's okay. Alright, so that's what I'll do. So I'll put that piece aside and get started assembling. Right there, you said I cut it right down the middle, and move my craft mat out of the way. But before I move my craft mat, I'm going to start to stamp the trees on the background of the paper. I'm going to use oatmeal cookie and cocoa powder again, and that tree stamp will come in right about now. This is the cedar tree. I love this tree. It's so gorgeous. It's great for backgrounds. So I want to cover up that bottom piece of the paper, so I'm just flipping my flannel paper over just a little bit so that I can cover it up and create a little mask. You can see where I use that white liner tape just to hold my strings from my sewing machine back. I didn't take the plastic off of the double-sided stick tape so it doesn't stick to everything. It just keeps my fabric down, or string down. Alright, so using cocoa powder, I'm just going to start to stamp away, doing about 4 or 5 different stamp positions of this tree onto the background paper. After I've done that, then I'm going to go in and just rub a little bit off with my washcloth, dry washcloth, and then start to dab it onto the oatmeal cookie paper, or excuse me, oatmeal cookie ink. Dabbing it on there and adding a little bit more. And that's just going to create a little bit of dimension and fun to my card, I think. Just adding a few more, making sure that that panel stays down there to mask off the bottom. Slipped a little bit. And one more, I think, on that edge right there. And it's finished. Alright, so put the lid back on and remove the mask. And now I can go ahead and apply that piece of flannel paper that I created just a little bit ago. I'm going to attach it with some glue, so I'm going to grab my craft glue. And as you can see, it's a little bit bigger than the paper, but that's no problem because I'll be attaching some Black Journey Twine to it. So just add a little bit of that craft glue. Yummy. It's not too wet. It's very, very good stick power too. And I will attach that to the paper. You can see that I'm trying to lift it off the edge there. I wanted to just create a little contrast between the tree background and that bottom there. Alright, and so now I'm going to just press it down, hold it there for a little bit. It's off center a little bit, so I'll just slide it over to make it even. Now it's even. See the sides now, they're even. Both sides hang over the edge just a little bit. And then I'm going to mount this. Oh, but I noticed my craft paper is a little bit too long, so I'm going to take it to the paper cutter and trim it down just a little bit off the top so that it can fit on my blue cardstock. So off cutting away. Probably could trim this off. There it goes. There I am. All right, so I'm going to use my craft glue again, perfectly aligned. I don't use very much craft glue, just enough to help it adhere to the paper. And add a little bit of the Seek Adventure sentiment. I'm going to ink it up after it's aligned on the ink block. I'm going to ink it up with some oatmeal, some cocoa powder ink, and go directly on top of that plaid background. All right, so it looks good. Right, now the next step is to apply the twine. This is my most favorite twine. It's really strong and sturdy, and it just adds a lot to a card, so I use it a lot, very frequently when I'm making cards. All right, so I'm going to apply the wooden button with this. I'm going to thread through the holes because I don't like naked buttons, so I'll just thread through all 4 of the holes with this one piece of thread, and then I will come back and realign my twine just to make sure everything is nice and taut. I wish I would have had a larger button, but I ran out of the larger buttons, so I had to opt for this smaller version. I think the larger button works better with this card and this design, but sometimes you just have to do what you gotta do. All right, so I'm just reassembling the twine. And I'm going to reset the camera. And twirl over, under, over, under. It's perfectly aligned. So I'm going to tie it off now. And then I'll attach a little piece of twine or jute. I like to bring jute into the mix when I'm making a nature card. It just brings more rustic look to the card, I think. Alright, so that's just a little bit of twine. I'll just take a little bit of the jute, trim it down just a little bit, and then tie it on in a knot. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to aligning those fibers and then just curling that bottom edge a little bit. Now it's onto the boot. I'm going to stamp. The boot using some Black Licorice ink. And then I'm going to use the ink from the ink pads on my block as a watercolory look type of ink. So I'm going to be stamping just onto the block just to get some of my ink onto it. And then I'm going to use a small, very fine brush and some Journey Fusion blender. Okay, zooming in, I just wanted to be able to show you the close-up of my coloring. So as I zoom in, I'll also speed it up a little bit so you can watch me color in super speed. Back out a little bit so that you can see the cutting action. Not that that's so special, but I like to use long tipped scissors for my cutting. And I just trim around the edge by turning the paper, not the scissors. Alright, so it's cut out there. Now I don't like that white edge along the edge there, so I'm going to lighten that up just going to assemble it so that you can see that white crisp edge. It contrasts a lot with the cardstock on the card. So I'm just going to take from my finger, I'm just going to take a little bit of that oatmeal cookie and rub out some of that stark white on there. Then I'll do the back side as well. So I'll take my thumb and my index finger and just rub them together to just create a little bit more blending. All right, so now I'm finished with that. So I'll put that aside and I will get some foam squares. Sorry, it's off camera a little bit. You can see that I used a piece of scrap white paper. You can see that there's residue from, or remnants from, a sentiment that I used on this paper. See it? But that's okay. It didn't bleed through and it will work just fine for my purposes. Okay, and there it is. And that's the finished piece. So it'll coordinate well with the first original version. So now I have 2 cards that I can pass out and hand out to some family friends. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this creation. And if you are interested in any of the products that I used, you can contact me, or you can visit my website at www.funstampersjourney.com/401. I will include a list of all the materials used so that you have them for reference. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.